Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. My name is Sam Winters and I've been a forest ranger for exactly 14 months when this shit happened. October 2018. I was still that rookie who double-checked his compass every 10 minutes and kept trail maps in plastic bags like they were sacred texts. I thought I knew everything there was to know about the Great Smoky Mountains. I thought the forest was just trees and rocks and wildlife. I was wrong about everything. Emma Sullivan went missing on a Tuesday, 16 years old. Brown hair, green eyes, 5'4", last seen wearing a red North Face jacket that her mom bought her for her birthday 2 months ago. The family had been camping at Elkmont, and Emma had wandered off from their site around 3 p.m. to take Instagram photos of the autumn colors. When she didn't come back by dinner, her parents called us. I was the ranger who took the call. "Please." Emma's mother had sobbed into my radio that first night, her voice crackling through the static. "She's my baby. She's never been alone in the woods. She gets scared of thunderstorms. She can't spend a night out there." Behind her, I could hear Emma's little sister crying, and her father's strained voice trying to comfort them both. The desperation in their voices made my chest tight, and I promised them I'd find her. I should have known better than to make promises in these mountains. The first day of searching was textbook. I followed protocol, coordinated with the other rangers, set up a grid search pattern that covered a 2-mile radius from the campsite. My GPS worked perfectly. My radio crackled with regular check-ins, and the trails were exactly where they'd been every other day I'd walked them. We found her phone around sunset, cracked screen, dead battery, near the quiet walkway trail about half a mile from camp. That should have been a good sign. Instead, it was the last normal thing that happened. The second day started wrong. I was following the same trail where we'd found Emma's phone, but something felt off. The path seemed narrower somehow. The trees pressed closer together, their branches intertwining overhead in patterns I didn't remember from the day before. My GPS kept losing signal, showing my location as a blank spot on the digital map, like I was walking through a place that didn't exist. "Base, this is Winters," I radioed in. "GPS is acting up out here. Can you confirm my position?" Static answered me. Then Ranger Morrison's voice came through, distant and garbled. "Sam, signal's bad. Where? You?" I checked my phone. No bars. No data. The screen flickered between showing full battery and completely dead, like it couldn't decide what reality it wanted to live in. That's when I heard it for the first time. A house that shouldn't exist, screaming in a voice that sounded exactly like Emma Sullivan. It came from deeper in the forest past where the maintained trails ended. A girl's scream, desperate and terrified, calling for help, calling for her mother. My training told me to radio for backup, but my radio was nothing but white noise now. And that scream, Jesus, that scream went right through me. I followed it. The trees got denser as I pushed through the undergrowth. Rhododendron bushes tore at my uniform, and the canopy grew so thick that it felt like walking through perpetual twilight. But the screaming got clearer, more desperate. "Help me, please! I'm in the house. I can't get out." House? There were no houses this deep in the park. I'd studied every map, every survey, every historical record. But as I crested a small ridge, there it was. A ramshackle wooden structure that looked like it had been abandoned for decades. Gray, weathered boards, a collapsed porch, windows like empty eye sockets, and from inside, Emma's voice begging someone to let her out. I ran toward it, my heart hammering. This was it. This was how I'd prove myself, save the girl, become the ranger everyone could count on. But as I got within 50 yards of the house, the screaming stopped. The forest went completely silent. No birds, no insects, no wind through the leaves. I called out, "Emma, Emma, I'm Park Ranger Sam Winters. I'm here to help you." Nothing. I reached for the front door and my hand passed right through it, like the house was made of smoke and shadows. like it wasn't really there at all. When I looked up, the house was gone. I was standing in a small clearing surrounded by perfectly normal trees with my hand stretched out toward nothing but empty air. My radio crackled back to life. "Winters, report in. Where the hell are you?" I looked at my GPS. Signal was back, showing me exactly where I should be on a trail I'd walked 100 times. But I'd never seen this clearing before, and there was no sign that a house had ever stood here. I'm on the quiet walkway trail," I said into the radio, following up on the phone location. "Roger that. Any sign of the girl?" I stared at the empty clearing. Negative. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about that house, about Emma's screams coming from inside it. I pulled up every historical record I could find about the park. No structures had ever been built in that area. No old homesteads, no hunting cabins, no nothing. According to every official document, that piece of forest had been wilderness since before the park was established, but I'd heard her screaming from inside it. The third day, I went back to the same spot. The clearing was there, but it was different, smaller. The trees around it were different species, oak instead of poplar, pine instead of rhododendron. When I checked my GPS, it showed me in a location half a mile south of where I'd been the day before. "This doesn't make sense," I muttered, pulling out my paper map. According to the topographical lines, I was standing on a steep slope. But the ground beneath my feet was level. The screaming started again, closer this time. "I'm in the basement. The door's locked. Please, somebody help me." I spun around and there it was again. The same gray house, but now it was bigger. 2 stories instead of 1, with a wraparound porch that definitely hadn't been there before. Smoke was coming from the chimney like someone was living inside. I approached more carefully this time, my hand on my radio. But as I got closer, my radio filled with static. My GPS flickered and died. The house seemed to shimmer, like a mirage in the desert heat. "Emma," I called out. "Where are you?" "In here, in the basement. The stairs. Oh God, the stairs keep moving." I could hear her sobbing now, the kind of crying that comes from pure terror. I reached the front porch and the wooden boards creaked under my feet, definitely solid this time. The front door was painted red, with a tarnished brass knob that turned easily in my hand. Inside, the house was wrong. The floorboards were warped and rotted, but they were also pristine hardwood. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper that simultaneously showed Victorian roses and bare wooden planks. A staircase led up to a second floor, but also curved down into a basement that shouldn't exist because the house was built on level ground. "Emma," I called. "Keep talking. I'm coming." "Down here, but be careful. The house keeps changing." I started down the basement stairs, my flashlight cutting through darkness that seemed to swallow the beam. Each step creaked, and with each creak, the house groaned around me like it was in pain. The basement was bigger than the house above it, stretching out in directions that defied physics. And there, in the far corner, tied to a wooden chair, was Emma Sullivan. "Thank God," she sobbed when she saw my light. "I've been here for... How long have I been here? What day is it?" "It's Thursday," I said, running toward her. "You've been missing for 3 days." But as I got closer, Emma's face changed. Her 16-year-old features aged rapidly, 20, 30, 40, 60, until I was looking at an old woman with Emma's green eyes. "I've been waiting so much longer than that," she said in a voice like autumn leaves. "Decades, maybe centuries. Time doesn't work the same way in here." I stumbled backward. "You're not Emma." "I am Emma. I'm also Sarah, who got lost here in 1987, and Maria, from 1954, and Catherine, from 1923. The thing wearing Emma's face smiled with too many teeth. "We're all here, boy. All the girls who heard the house calling." The basement walls began to shift around me, extending into impossible distances. More chairs appeared out of the shadows, each one holding a different girl, each one aging and de-aging in a constant cycle. "The house is hungry," they said in unison, their voices overlapping in a horrible harmony. "It feeds on the lost ones, on the ones people love enough to risk everything to find. I turned and ran for the stairs, but they were gone. The basement stretched infinitely in every direction, filled with the sound of girls crying for help, calling for their mothers, their fathers, their brothers and sisters who would never stop looking for them. My flashlight died. In the absolute darkness, I heard Emma's real voice, young and terrified. "Sam? Is someone there? Please, I can't move. And the old women keep telling me I'm going to be like them." I used my phone's flashlight, and there she was. The real Emma, still 16, still in her red jacket, tied to a chair that sat in the center of what looked like a root cellar. The other chairs, the other girls, were gone. "Emma, I'm Ranger Sam Winters. I'm here to get you out." "The house won't let me go," she whispered. "Every time someone finds me, it changes. It makes them lost too." As if responding to her words, the walls began to shift again. The basement stairs reappeared, but now there were 3 different staircases leading up, each one at an impossible angle. "Which way is out?" I asked. "I don't know. They all lead somewhere different. One goes to the forest, one goes to the house's stomach, and one..." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "One leads to a room where the house keeps everyone it's ever caught." I could hear my radio crackling from somewhere upstairs, Morrison's voice calling my name. "Sam! Sam, where are you? We lost your GPS signal 2 hours ago." 2 hours? I'd only been in the house for 20 minutes. "Emma, we're leaving. All of us, right now." I cut her restraints with my knife and helped her stand. Her legs nearly buckled. How long had she really been here? "It won't work," she said. "The house decides who leaves." "Bullshit. I'm a park ranger. I know these woods. I know the way out." But as we climbed the stairs, I chose the middle one because middle seemed safest. I realized that knowing the woods didn't matter anymore. The house had its own geography, its own rules. We emerged not into the main floor of the house, but onto the front porch. But the forest beyond the porch wasn't the Great Smoky Mountains. It was a forest where the trees grew downward from the sky, their roots reaching up toward clouds that swirled like water. Paths wound through the air in spirals and figure eights. In the distance, I could see other houses, dozens of them, hundreds, each one calling out with different voices, luring different victims. "This isn't real," I said. "It's as real as anything else," Emma replied. "The house showed me this on my first day. This is what the forest really looks like, underneath all the maps and GPS coordinates and human understanding. This is the forest that was here before people, and it'll be here after we're gone." My radio crackled again. "Sam, your GPS just came back online. You're showing 3 miles south of your last known position. How did you get there?" 3 miles? The house had been moving us through the forest, changing the landscape around itself like pieces on a chessboard. "Emma," I said, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your family is out there. Your mom, your dad, your little sister. They've been looking for you for 3 days, and they're not going to stop. They love you more than this house can understand. And that love, that's our way out." "How?" "The house feeds on people getting lost. But love is the opposite of lost. Love is connection. It's knowing exactly where you belong." I took Emma's hand. "Close your eyes and think about your family. Not about being here, but about being with them. Think about the last thing your mom said to you before you went for that hike." Emma closed her eyes. She said to be back by dinner because she was making my favorite pasta. Keep thinking about that, about sitting at the table with them, eating that pasta, telling them about the photos you took. As Emma focused on the memory, the impossible forest began to flicker. The upside-down trees wavered like a reflection in disturbed water. "It's working," I whispered. "Keep going. I can see our campsite," Emma said, her eyes still closed. "I can smell Dad's terrible camp coffee. I can hear my sister asking if she can borrow my lip gloss." The forest of impossibilities began to fade, replaced by normal trees, normal paths, normal October sunlight filtering through the canopy. "Open your eyes." We were standing in a perfectly ordinary clearing in the Great Smoky Mountains. My GPS showed our correct location. My radio was clear and strong, and in the distance I could hear search dogs barking and voices calling Emma's name. Behind us there was no house. There never had been a house. But as we walked toward the voices of the search team, I heard something that made my blood freeze. A faint echo of creaking wood and the sound of girls crying for help, coming from somewhere deeper in the forest. The house was still out there, still hungry, still waiting for the next person who loved someone enough to risk everything to find them. We found the search team within an hour. Emma was dehydrated and exhausted, but physically unharmed. The doctors at the hospital said she'd been in the woods for 3 days, but couldn't explain why she showed no signs of exposure or malnutrition. Her story was classified as disorientation due to stress, and everyone was happy to leave it at that. Everyone except me. Emma's mother hugged me so tight that I thought she might crack my ribs. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for bringing my baby home." Her father shook my hand and said, "We'll never forget what you did." Her little sister looked up at me with huge eyes and said, "You're like a superhero, Mr. Sam." I wanted to tell them that I hadn't saved Emma, that love had saved her. Their love, strong enough to guide her home through a forest that had forgotten how to follow the laws of physics. But how do you explain something like that to people who just want their family back? I filed my report and recommended that the search area be marked as difficult terrain for future reference. I didn't mention the house. I didn't mention the impossible forest or the basement full of missing girls or the way the landscape had shifted around us like a living thing. But I think about it every day. I've been a ranger for 3 years now, not 14 months, and I know these mountains better than most. I've walked every trail, mapped every creek, learned to read the forest like a book. But sometimes when I'm deep in the woods and the light is getting dim, I hear it again. The sound of girls crying for help, coming from a house that should not exist. And sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I wonder, how many families are out there right now sitting by their phones waiting for news about someone they love who heard the house calling? How many people are going to love someone enough to follow them into a forest that eats the lost? And when they do, will I be brave enough to follow love instead of logic, connection instead of coordinates? My name is Sam Winters. I'm a forest ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains, and I know that there are places in these woods where the trees forget how to grow in straight lines, where time moves sideways, and where houses build themselves out of hunger and sorrow. The forest is vast and old and full of things that our maps can't measure, but love is older than all of them. Sometimes that's enough. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park logged 47 missing person cases in 2018. 46 of those people were found safely. The 47th case remains open. Rangers are advised to report any structural anomalies immediately to park headquarters. Trust your equipment, trust your training. And if you can't trust either of those, trust the people who love you enough to guide you home. Internal Park Service Memo, November 2018. My name is Jonathan Parker, and I need to tell someone what really happened in Olympic National Park in October 2018, because the official report doesn't even scratch the surface of the hell I walked through to bring Rachel Green home. Most folks around the ranger station called me Wiki behind my back. Not exactly a compliment when you're trying to prove yourself in a job where respect comes from years in the wilderness, not from knowing every species of moss in Washington state. But what those old-timers didn't understand was that sometimes the forest speaks in languages that only the obsessive and detail-oriented can hear, and that October, the Olympic forest was screaming warnings that I was the only one nerdy enough to recognize. Rachel Green disappeared on a Tuesday morning while hiking the Hoh River Trail with her younger sister Emma. According to Emma's statement, Rachel had insisted on taking a shortcut through an unmarked path they'd never seen before, which was strange because Rachel was a careful hiker who always stuck to established trails. Emma said the path appeared suddenly between two massive Douglas firs, almost like it had materialized just for them. But when she tried to follow Rachel down it, she couldn't find the opening again. The other rangers dismissed this as panic-induced confusion, but I'd spent enough time cataloging every goddamn trail in that section to know that no path existed where Emma described, and yet her GPS showed she'd been standing in exactly the spot she claimed. The Green family drove up from Portland that same day, and I'll never forget the way Rachel's mother, Susan, gripped my hands when she begged me to find her daughter. "She's all we have left since her father died," Susan whispered, her eyes red from crying. Rachel promised she'd never leave us alone. She promised. The desperation in that woman's voice cut deeper than any criticism my colleagues had ever thrown at me, because I recognized the weight of a promise that could pull someone back from the edge of anything, even death itself. Rachel's brother Michael showed me recent photos of her laughing at their family barbecue just the week before, pointing out how healthy and happy she looked, how much she had to live for, and something about the way he touched her image on his phone screen made my chest tighten with the absolute certainty that this family's love was powerful enough to anchor Rachel to this world no matter what had taken her. I started my search at dawn on Wednesday, following Emma's path to the spot where she'd last seen her sister. My GPS unit was acting strangely that morning. The screen kept flickering between different trail maps, sometimes showing paths that I knew for a fact had been closed for years, sometimes displaying elevation changes that were completely wrong for the area. I figured it was just another piece of government equipment on its last legs, but when I looked up from trying to reset it, I realized I was standing at the base of a trail marker I'd never seen before. The wooden sign was weathered and moss-covered like it had been there for decades, but it pointed toward a path that cut through terrain I'd mapped extensively just 6 months ago. Terrain that had been nothing but impenetrable old-growth forest with no clearings or natural passages. The path itself seemed normal enough at first, just another deer trail that had been widened by occasional human use. But as I followed it deeper into the forest, I started noticing things that made the analytical part of my brain start throwing up red flags. The Douglas firs along the path were massive, easily 300-400 years old based on their circumference. But they were growing in perfectly straight lines like they'd been planted by landscapers rather than growing naturally over centuries. The understory was wrong too. I was seeing plant combinations that shouldn't exist together, like finding desert sage growing next to temperate rainforest ferns, all thriving in the same patch of soil as if the basic laws of ecology had decided to take a coffee break. By midday, my smartphone had joined my GPS in rebellion, constantly losing signal despite being in an area where I'd had full bars just weeks before. The compass on my watch was spinning lazily in circles, and even my backup analog compass was pointing toward magnetic north 1 minute and true north the next, as if the forest couldn't make up its mind about which direction was which. I tried calling in my position to base camp, but all I got was static punctuated by brief moments of clarity where I could hear what sounded like other rangers having completely different conversations. Conversations about cases from years ago, about missing hikers I'd never heard of, about protocols that didn't match anything in our current handbook. The first time the trail disappeared, I thought I'd simply taken a wrong turn. I'd been following a clear, well-defined path for over 3 hours when I stopped to drink some water and check my map. But when I looked up, the trail was just gone. Not overgrown, not blocked by fallen trees. Just gone, as if it had never existed. I was standing in the middle of dense underbrush with no indication that anyone had ever passed through the area, despite the fact that I'd been walking on packed dirt and worn stones just moments before. The trees around me looked familiar, but they were arranged differently, like someone had taken the forest I knew and shuffled it like a deck of cards. I spent 20 minutes bushwhacking through undergrowth, certain I could find the trail again if I just retraced my steps, but every direction looked exactly the same. Then, just as panic was starting to creep in, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Rachel's voice clear as day, calling out, "Help me, John, I'm right here." The voice came from directly ahead, through a gap between 2 ancient cedars that I could have sworn wasn't there 60 seconds ago. I pushed through the gap and found myself back on the trail. Not just any trail, but the exact same trail I'd been following, complete with my own boot prints in the mud from earlier that morning. The afternoon got worse. I found Rachel's red hiking pack hanging from a branch at least 15 feet off the ground, despite the fact that the tree it was in had no lower branches that could have been climbed. When I managed to retrieve it using a stick, the pack contained items that didn't make sense. Rachel's wallet and keys were there, along with her water bottle and energy bars, but there was also an old-fashioned compass that belonged in a museum, a hand-drawn map of trails that didn't exist, and a leather-bound journal filled with entries in Rachel's handwriting describing hikes through Olympic National Park dating back to 1987, 31 years ago, when Rachel would have been -10 years old. The journal entries were detailed and vivid, describing specific landmarks and encounters with park rangers whose names I recognized from old personnel files. One entry, dated September 15, 1987, described meeting Ranger Bill Henderson at the Hoh River crossing. He warned me about the old growth section past mile marker 7, said 3 hikers had disappeared there in the past decade, and the Forest Service was considering closing that section permanently. I knew Bill Henderson. He'd retired in 2003 and died in 2011, but more importantly, I'd read his incident reports from the 1980s. 3 hikers had indeed disappeared in that exact section in 1987, and the trail had been temporarily closed that fall. As I read more entries, the handwriting began to change subtly, becoming more frantic and desperate. The dates jumped around randomly: 1993, 2001, 1979, 2015, but all described the same experience: being lost in Olympic National Park, following trails that appeared and disappeared, looking for a way home while something malevolent hunted through the forest. The final entry, dated October 16, 2018, the day before Rachel's disappearance, was written in shaking letters. It's been feeding on lost hikers for decades. It doesn't just kill them, it keeps them, makes them part of the forest so it can use their voices to lure others deeper. I can hear them all calling to me now, asking me to join them. I don't know if I'm Rachel Green anymore, or if I'm just another echo it's collected. Night fell faster than it should have in October, and my headlamp kept dimming despite fresh batteries I'd installed that morning. The forest around me had gone completely silent. No owl calls, no rustling leaves, no insect sounds. Just an oppressive quiet that felt like being wrapped in cotton. My breath was visible in the suddenly frigid air, and frost was forming on the ferns despite the weather forecast predicting mild temperatures in the 60s. I tried to radio base camp again, but instead of static, I heard Rachel's voice coming through my radio. "John, you need to get out of here. It knows you're coming. It's been waiting for someone like you. Someone who pays attention to details. Someone who might actually figure out what it's doing." The voice was definitely Rachel's, but there was something wrong with it, like she was speaking from the bottom of a well. "The trails are its web, John. It rearranges them to trap people, keeps them walking in circles until they're too exhausted to resist. I've been trying to fight it, but I'm getting weaker. It wants to add me to its collection, use my voice to catch others. You have to find the center, the place where all the false trails meet. But John, when you find it, when you see what it really is, you might not want to save me anymore." I followed my compass, which was now pointing in a direction that couldn't possibly be north, deeper into the increasingly alien forest. The trees were growing at impossible angles now, some horizontal, others twisted into spirals, a few actually growing downward with their roots reaching toward the sky. The ground beneath my feet shifted between solid earth, swampy marsh, and rocky scree, sometimes changing with each step I took. Distance meant nothing here. I could see a landmark that looked 50 yards away, hike toward it for an hour, and still be no closer to reaching it. The center, when I found it, was worse than anything my analytical mind could have prepared me for. It was a clearing that shouldn't have existed in old-growth forest, perfectly circular and about the size of a football field. The trees around the perimeter were ancient beyond measure, their trunks twisted and fused together into grotesque shapes that hurt to look at directly. In the middle of the clearing stood something that might have been human once, but had been changed by decades or maybe centuries of feeding on lost souls. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, and had too many joints in its arms and legs, like extra elbows and knees had been inserted wherever they might be useful. Its skin was bark-colored and had the texture of tree moss, but it moved with fluid grace that was completely wrong for something that looked like it should be rooted to the ground. The worst part was its face, which wasn't one face at all, but dozens of them, shifting and blending like a video screen cycling through channels. I saw Rachel's face appear for just a moment, her mouth open in a silent scream, before it was replaced by an elderly man I didn't recognize. then a young boy, then a woman about my mother's age. "Jonathan Parker," it said in a voice that was every missing hiker I'd ever read about in incident reports, speaking in perfect unison. "The smart one. The one who notices things. We've been waiting so long for someone like you to join us." As it spoke, I could see Rachel suspended in the air behind it, wrapped in something that looked like spider silk but moved like it was alive. She was conscious, but couldn't speak, her eyes wide with terror and pleading with me to run. "She's been fighting us," the thing continued, Rachel's face appearing again among the others. "So much love holding her to the world above, her family's love, their desperate need for her to return. It makes her difficult to digest. But you, Jonathan, you're alone. No one would miss the nerdy ranger who thinks too much and talks too little. You'd make such a peaceful addition to our family." That's when I understood what Susan Green had really been telling me when she'd gripped my hands and begged me to find her daughter. Rachel wasn't just loved. She was anchored by love so powerful it was keeping her soul from being completely absorbed by this ancient predator. The thing could take her body, wrap her in its web, use her voice to lure others, but it couldn't claim her completely because somewhere in Portland, her family's love was burning like a beacon, calling her home. But I wasn't alone either, I realized. I might not have had Rachel's kind of family love, but I had something else. The desperate trust that Susan Green had placed in me. The weight of Michael's hope when he'd shown me his sister's photograph. The responsibility I'd accepted when I'd promised to bring Rachel home. Their love for her had become my mission, and that mission was stronger than my fear. "You're wrong," I told the thing, pulling out my emergency flare gun. "I'm not alone. I'm carrying the love of everyone who wants Rachel Green to come home." I fired the flare directly at the creature's shifting face, and for just a moment, all the faces screamed in unison as ancient barkskin caught fire. The thing staggered backward, and Rachel dropped to the ground, still wrapped in the living silk but conscious and fighting to get free. What happened next defied everything I thought I knew about physics and biology and the basic laws of nature. As the creature burned, the false forest around us began to dissolve like a movie set being struck. The impossible trees straightened and repositioned themselves. The twisted clearings reformed into familiar landscapes, and the trails that had been shifting and vanishing throughout my search locked into their proper positions. My GPS unit and phone both chimed back to life simultaneously, showing my exact location and a clear path back to the main trail system. But the thing wasn't dead, just angry. As its stolen faces melted away in the flare's fire, something older and far more terrible was revealed underneath. Something that might have been a person once, decades or centuries ago, before it had started feeding on lost hikers and taking on their characteristics. "You can burn away our collected souls," it hissed in a voice like grinding stone. "But you cannot burn away what we really are. We are the hunger that lives in dark places. We are the reason people disappear in forests. We have been here since the first human lost their way among trees, and we will be here long after your kind is gone." I used my last 2 flares to keep the thing at bay while I cut Rachel free from the silk cocoon. She was weak but alive, able to walk with support, though she kept looking over her shoulder at the creature as if she expected it to follow us. "It's not over, John," she whispered as we stumbled toward the reformed trail. "I can still feel it in my head sometimes. It left part of itself in me, and part of me is still back there with it. I don't think anyone ever completely escapes." The hike back to civilization took 4 hours, and Rachel told me things during those 4 hours that will haunt me for the rest of my life. She'd been trapped in that clearing for 3 days, but had experienced weeks or maybe months of subjective time while the creature tried to break down her psychological defenses. It had shown her false versions of her family, versions where they'd forgotten about her, where they were happy she was gone, where they blamed her for her father's death. But every time she was about to give in, she'd remember something real. Her mother's laugh, her brother's terrible jokes, the way they'd all held each other and cried together at her father's funeral. The thing that saved me wasn't hope. Rachel told me, as we finally saw the lights of the ranger station through the trees, it was memory. specific, detailed memories of being loved. It could create false versions of my family, but it couldn't replicate the exact way my mom hums off key when she's cooking. Or the way Michael always puts too much salt on everything, because Dad used to do that. Love has a texture, John. It has details, and those details are harder to fake than fear. The official report listed Rachel's disappearance as hiker disorientation due to unusual weather conditions and equipment malfunction. The other rangers commended me for my thorough search pattern and attention to detail, finally giving me the respect I'd been seeking since I started the job. But I know the truth. The Olympic Forest harbors something that has been feeding on lost humans for longer than our species has kept written records. And the only reason Rachel Green came home alive is because her family's love created a lifeline strong enough to pull her back from the edge of being consumed entirely. Rachel recovered physically within a week, but she was never quite the same. She moved back in with her mother and brother in Portland, claiming she needed to be closer to family after her traumatic experience. She still hikes, but never alone, and never in old-growth forest. Sometimes she calls me late at night to talk about what we experienced together, because we're the only two people who know what really happened in those woods. I can still hear them sometimes, John, she told me during one of those calls about 6 months after the incident. All the voices of the people it collected over the years. They're still trapped there, still trying to warn new hikers away from the false trails. I think part of my job now is to remember them, to be witness to the fact that they existed, that they mattered to someone before that thing took them. I still work as a ranger in Olympic National Park, and I still get called Wiki by some of the older guys, but now it's said with something approaching admiration rather than mockery. I've developed a reputation for having an almost supernatural ability to find lost hikers, and I suppose that's true in a way. The thing is still out there, still creating false trails and luring people deeper into the forest than they should go. But now I know what signs to look for: equipment malfunction, impossible plant combinations, trails that appear and disappear, and most importantly, the complete absence of animal sounds. I've rescued 14 people over the past 4 years, people who might have ended up as part of that creature's collection if I hadn't recognized the signs of supernatural predation. Each time I tell them the same thing I told Rachel during our hike back to safety. Remember the details of being loved, because those details are what make you real and what make you worth saving. The Green family sends me a Christmas card every year, always with a recent photo of Rachel looking healthy and happy. Last year's card included a note from Rachel herself. "Thank you for believing that love could be stronger than hunger, John. Thank you for carrying our family's love deep enough into the dark to light my way home. But I know the truth that I've never told any of them. I didn't carry their love into that forest. Their love carried me, guided me to the exact place where Rachel needed to be found, gave me the strength to face something that should have been impossible. The real horror of the Olympic Forest isn't that there's a creature feeding on lost hikers. It's that there are probably dozens or hundreds of similar creatures in forests all over the world, and the only thing protecting us from them is the network of love and connection that binds us to each other and gives us reason to fight our way back home. My name is Jonathan Parker, and I've seen what lives in the spaces between the official trails. I've learned that sometimes the forest rearranges itself to trap the unwary, and that some hungers are old enough to predate human civilization. But I've also learned that love leaves traces that can't be faked or consumed, and that sometimes being the guy who notices every detail, the guy they call Wiki behind his back, is exactly what someone needs to find their way back to the people who are waiting for them to come home. The Olympic Forest is still dangerous, still harboring things that shouldn't exist according to any rational understanding of the natural world. But it's also still beautiful, still worth protecting, still capable of renewal and growth and healing. And sometimes on clear October mornings when the light slants through the old-growth canopy just right, I can almost convince myself that the forest is grateful. Grateful that someone like me is standing guard, watching for the signs that mean someone is about to become lost in ways that have nothing to do with simply taking a wrong turn on a familiar trail. Rachel Green came home because love is stronger than hunger. That's the truth I carry with me into the forest every day, and it's the truth that keeps me sane when I encounter things that shouldn't exist but do. In a world where ancient predators still hunt in the spaces between reality, Love is the only reliable navigation system we have, and sometimes that's enough. End of report. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I've been a forest ranger for 18 years in Olympic National Park, Washington. I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. Lost hikers, bear attacks, freak storms that could kill you in minutes. But what happened to me during the search for Jessica Anderson in October of 2018 changed everything I thought I knew about this place, about myself, and about the things that live in the shadows between the trees. Jess Anderson was 23, a graduate student from Seattle doing research on old-growth ecosystems. She'd been missing for 3 days when her parents showed up at the ranger station, and I'll never forget the look in her mother's eyes, that raw, desperate love that only a parent knows. "Please," she whispered, gripping my hand so tight it hurt. "Please bring our baby home." Her father just stood there, strong jaw trembling, trying not to break down in front of strangers, but I could see it eating him alive from the inside. The first day of the search went normal enough. We had dogs, helicopters, the whole 9 yards. Found her campsite about 6 miles up the Hoh River Trail, tent still zipped up, sleeping bag laid out like she'd just stepped away for a minute. Her research notes were scattered around like something had gone through them, but that could have been the wind. What bothered me was her cell phone, brand new iPhone X, still had juice, but when I tried to turn it on, the screen just showed static, like tuning into a dead TV channel. By the second day, things started getting weird. My GPS kept glitching, showing locations that didn't exist, trails that weren't on any map. My radio would pick up voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize, and when dispatch tried to reach me, all they got was white noise. But I've been doing this long enough to know that electronics fail in the wilderness. Moisture, altitude, solar flares, whatever. I kept pushing deeper into the forest, following every lead, every broken branch that might have been left by a scared girl trying to find her way home. That's when I started seeing them. At first, it was just glimpses in my peripheral vision. Figures standing between distant trees, gone when I turned to look directly. I told myself it was fatigue, stress, the way shadows play tricks when you've been hiking for 12 hours straight. But by the third day, they weren't hiding anymore. Standing right there on the trail in front of me, clear as day. Bobby Martinez, age 12, the kid I couldn't find fast enough back in '03, standing there in his little Seahawks jersey, still looking exactly like he did in the missing person photos, except now his eyes were black holes and his mouth was moving without making any sound. "Jesus Christ," I whispered, blinking hard, shaking my head. When I looked again, he was gone, but the air where he'd been standing felt cold enough to see my breath. That's when I knew something was seriously fucking wrong with this place. The deeper I went into the forest, the more of them appeared. Sarah Chen from 2011, the college girl who fell down that ravine while I was checking a false lead 20 miles away. Old Man Peterson from 2007, who had that heart attack while I was filling out paperwork instead of approving the emergency helicopter. They didn't say anything, just stood there watching me with those empty, accusing eyes, and every time I saw one, I felt that familiar knot of guilt tightening in my chest like a noose. By the fourth day, I wasn't just seeing the ones I'd failed to save. I was seeing the ones I hadn't even known about yet. A little girl in a yellow dress who couldn't have been more than 6, pointing down a trail that led to nowhere. An old woman in a hiking jacket from the '80s, shaking her head at me like I should have known better. And Jessica Anderson herself, standing at the edge of a clearing I'd never seen before despite knowing these woods for 2 decades. But this Jessica looked different, older, sadder, like she'd been waiting in that spot for years instead of days. The worst part wasn't seeing them. The worst part was starting to remember things that hadn't happened yet. Sitting at my kitchen table telling my wife Linda that we'd found Jessica's body. Standing at a podium in a courtroom, explaining to a jury why I'd fucked up the search. Watching my own daughter Emma turn away from me in disgust, saying she was ashamed to call me her father. These memories felt real, solid, like they'd already happened and I was just remembering them. But they couldn't be real because Jessica was still alive, still out there somewhere, still needing me to find her. The forest itself started changing around me. Trails I'd walked 1,000 times led to dead ends. Trees grew in patterns that made no sense, forming shapes that hurt to look at directly. The sound of running water came from directions where I knew there were no streams. My compass spun like a carnival ride, and when I checked my watch, the hands moved backwards. Time was breaking down, reality was breaking down, and I was starting to wonder if I was losing my fucking mind. On the 5th day, I found myself in a part of the forest that shouldn't exist. The trees were massive, older than anything in Olympic National Park, their trunks so wide that 10 people holding hands couldn't circle them. The air was thick and green and tasted like copper pennies. And there, in the center of a ring of these ancient giants, I saw all of them at once. Every person I'd ever failed to save, standing in a perfect circle, their faces turned toward me with expressions of infinite sadness and disappointment. Bobby Martinez, Sarah Chen, Old Man Peterson, and dozens of others I'd somehow forgotten until this moment. They opened their mouths and spoke in perfect unison, their voices like wind through dead leaves. Why didn't you try harder, Marcus? Why weren't you good enough? That's when I broke. I fell to my knees in the moss and decaying leaves, sobbing like a child, feeling the weight of every failure, every missed opportunity, every second I'd wasted on the wrong trail while someone died alone and scared. I'm sorry, I whispered. God, I'm so fucking sorry. I tried, I swear I tried, but I wasn't fast enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't... You were enough. The voice came from behind me, soft and warm and familiar. I turned around and saw Jessica Anderson, but not the older, sadder version from my visions. This was the real Jessica, 23 years old, alive, her research clothes torn and dirty, but her eyes bright and determined. You were always enough, Marcus. The forest just wanted you to think you weren't. Jessica, Jesus, how long have you been? Where have you been? We've been looking for you for 5 days. I stumbled to my feet, reaching for my radio, but the static was so thick I couldn't get through. She shook her head, smiling sadly. I've been right here watching you torture yourself. This place, these trees, they're old, Marcus. Older than the park, older than the state, maybe older than people. And they're hungry. They feed on guilt, on regret, on the things we can't let go of. They took me because they could smell the pain on you from miles away. I looked around the circle of accusing faces, but they were starting to fade, becoming translucent. You mean they're not real? All the people I couldn't save? Oh, they're real, Jessica said, walking toward me across the ancient grove. But they don't blame you. They never did. That's all you, Marcus. That's all the poison you've been carrying around, feeding this thing, making it stronger. She reached out and touched my chest, right over my heart. Your wife loves you. Your daughter loves you. These families love you for trying, not for being perfect. The only person who doesn't forgive you is you. The circle of ghosts was almost gone now, and the ancient trees were starting to look normal again, like regular old-growth cedars instead of something from a nightmare. My radio crackled to life with actual voices, dispatch calling my name, other rangers reporting their positions in the search grid. Time was moving forward again. How do we get out of here? I asked Jessica, but even as I said it, I could see a familiar trail opening up between the trees, leading back toward known territory. We walk, she said simply, and we stop feeding the thing that wants us to stay lost. It took us 6 hours to hike back to base camp, during which my GPS started working again. My radio maintained clear contact with the search team, and my watch kept normal time. Jessica told me about her research, about getting turned around on an unmarked trail and finding herself in places that didn't match her maps. She'd been walking in circles for 5 days, seeing things that weren't there, convinced that everyone had given up looking for her. When we finally emerged from the tree line, I saw the Anderson family waiting by the ranger station. Jessica's mother saw us first and let out a scream that was pure joy and relief. Her father ran toward us, tears streaming down his face. As I watched them embrace their daughter, I felt something in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. Not the knot of guilt and failure, but the warm certainty that sometimes, just sometimes, love is stronger than the things that try to destroy us. Linda and Emma were waiting for me at home that night. They'd heard about the successful rescue on the news. Emma hugged me tight and said she was proud of me, and Linda held my face in her hands and told me she'd always known I'd bring Jessica home. For the first time in 18 years, I believed that maybe I was good at my job, not in spite of my failures, but because of how much they'd taught me about the importance of never giving up. The official report listed Jessica's disappearance as a case of disorientation due to unmarked trails and equipment malfunction. That's the truth as far as anyone needs to know. But sometimes, late at night, I think about those ancient trees and what Jessica said about things that are older and hungrier than we can imagine. I think about all the missing person cases that never get solved, all the people who walk into the forest and simply vanish without a trace. And I wonder how many of them are still out there, wandering in circles, feeding the thing that lives in the dark spaces between the trees, the thing that whispers that we're not good enough, not fast enough, not worthy of love or forgiveness, the thing that grows stronger every time we believe its lies. My name is Marcus Thompson, and I'm a forest ranger. I've learned that the most dangerous thing in any wilderness isn't the bears or the weather or the 1,000 ways the mountain can kill you. The most dangerous thing is the voice in your head that says you don't deserve to find your way home. But here's what I know now. That voice is lying. And love, real love, the kind that makes people wait by ranger stations and run toward you with tears in their eyes, is the only compass that never fails, the only trail that always leads you back to where you belong. The forest remembers everything, but so does the heart. My name is Thomas Anderson, and I've been a forest ranger at Olympic National Park for 26 years. In all that time, I thought I'd seen everything these ancient woods could throw at me, until October 13th, 2018, when Amanda Wheeler disappeared, and I learned that some horrors don't follow the natural laws I'd spent my life understanding. Amanda was 19, a University of Washington freshman who'd come up to the Hoh River Trail with her boyfriend for what should have been a simple day hike. When only the boyfriend stumbled out at sunset, babbling about the trees that sang backwards, and Amanda being taken by the shadow people, I figured we had another case of a scared kid abandoning his girlfriend when things got tough. I was wrong about everything. The Wheeler family arrived at my ranger station at 11 p.m., and I knew immediately this wasn't going to be routine. Amanda's mother, Carol, had that hollow-eyed look of a woman who'd already lost too much. I later learned Amanda was their only child, after losing twin boys in a car accident 5 years prior. Her father, Jim, kept checking his iPhone obsessively, calling Amanda's number over and over, each call going straight to voicemail. She never turns her phone off, he kept saying. Never, not since her brothers. I organized the search for First Light, assembling my usual team and bringing in the county K9 unit. What I didn't expect was for my GPS to start malfunctioning the moment we entered the forest, showing impossible readings like we were somehow moving backwards through our own trail. Technology had never failed me like this in Olympic National Park. 3 hours in, we found Amanda's backpack hanging from a Douglas fir about 8 feet off the ground, positioned like someone had carefully placed it there as a marker. Inside was her iPhone, fully charged but displaying nothing but static when we turned it on. The strangest part was what I found carved into the tree bark directly below. AW plus eternity, in letters that looked both fresh and decades old simultaneously. That's when I first experienced the loop, though I didn't recognize it for what it was. I remember walking north from the tree for exactly 47 minutes, following what looked like Amanda's footprints in the soft earth, when suddenly I was back at the same Douglas fir, staring up at her backpack again. My radio crackled with my own voice from earlier. "Base, this is Anderson. We found something unusual." The second time through, I paid closer attention. The footprints weren't just Amanda's. There were at least 6 different sets of boots, all adult-sized, forming a perfect circle around trees marked with symbols I'd never seen before in my quarter century in these woods. The symbols looked burned into the bark, and they hurt to look at directly, like they were vibrating at a frequency that made my vision blur. By the third loop, panic started setting in. My radio was picking up fragments of conversations that couldn't be happening. Dispatch reporting Amanda found safe, then Amanda found dead, then Amanda never existed at all. My experienced team members were becoming confused, asking why we kept returning to the same location when they swore we'd been walking in straight lines. The fourth loop changed everything. I started seeing them. Figures in dark robes moving between the trees just at the edge of my peripheral vision, always staying perfectly synchronized with our movements. When I tried to point them out to my team, they saw nothing. But I could hear their chanting now, a low humming that seemed to come from the earth itself. Loop 5 brought the first temporal distortions. I watched a squirrel fall from a tree branch, hit the ground, then immediately reverse back up to the branch, over and over, like someone was rewinding the same 3 seconds of footage. A stream began flowing uphill. My digital watch started running backwards, and when I checked my analog backup, both hands were spinning wildly in opposite directions. Carol Wheeler's desperate voice crackled through my failing radio during Loop 6. "Please, Mr. Anderson, she's all we have left. After we lost the boys, Amanda became our whole world. You have to find her, you have to." The love in her voice was so raw, so pure, that it cut through the supernatural chaos like a blade through fog. Loop 7 showed me Amanda herself, or what the cult wanted me to think was Amanda. She stood in a clearing I'd never seen before, wearing a white dress instead of her hiking clothes, beckoning me forward while her mouth moved in silent screams. When I reached for her, my hand passed through empty air, but I could feel cold breath on my neck and hear whispers in a language that predated human speech. By Loop 8, the forest had become completely alien. Trees grew downward from an underground sky, trails led in impossible directions, and gravity seemed negotiable. I realized I wasn't just lost in space. I was lost in time itself. The robed figures were clearer now, their faces hidden but their intentions obvious. They needed something from Amanda, something they could only take by trapping her in an endless moment. Loop 9 brought revelation and horror. I found their ritual site, a stone circle that definitely hadn't been there in any of my previous 26 years of service. Surrounded by symbols carved so deep into the rock they looked like they'd been there since the Ice Age, Amanda was in the center, unconscious but alive, suspended 3 feet off the ground by invisible forces while 13 figures chanted around her. The cult leader stepped forward as I approached, lowering his hood to reveal a face that was ancient beyond measure, skin like parchment and eyes that held too much knowledge. "Ranger Anderson," he said in a voice like grinding stone, "you've been circling us for days now. Time moves differently when you serve the old powers. Let her go," I said, raising my service weapon, though something told me bullets wouldn't help here. "Her family needs her. They've already lost too much." He laughed, and the sound made reality ripple around us like water. "Family? Love? These are temporary illusions. We offer eternal moment, endless now. The girl will feed our circle's power forever, trapped in the perfect instant between heartbeats." That's when I understood. The loops weren't a trap for me. They were a preview of Amanda's fate. She was going to be stuck in one moment for eternity, her life force slowly drained to fuel their dark magic. The thought of Carol and Jim Wheeler losing their last child, of their love turning to ash like everything else the cult had destroyed, filled me with a rage that burned through the supernatural fog. Loop 10 was different because I made it different. Instead of following the script, I charged the circle, screaming Amanda's name and thinking about her parents' desperate love. The cult's chanting faltered as my voice cut through their ritual, and for the first time in days, I felt time move forward instead of circling. The robed figures turned toward me with inhuman speed, but something had changed in me too. Maybe it was spending so many loops in contact with their power, or maybe it was the pure force of a family's love channeling through me. But I could see their magic now, streams of dark energy flowing between them, holding Amanda suspended, keeping time locked in place. I fired 6 shots not at the cultists, but at the stone symbols beneath their feet. Each bullet strike sent cracks through their carefully carved patterns, and each crack released a burst of normal time back into the circle. Amanda's body jerked as gravity reasserted itself and she fell hard to the ground, gasping. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward what I hoped was still the trail out. Behind us, the cultists were screaming in that prehistoric language, and I could feel reality bending as they tried to restart their ritual. Trees aged decades in seconds, then snapped back to youth. The ground beneath our feet alternated between solid earth and empty space. We ran through a forest that couldn't decide what century it wanted to be in, past streams that flowed backwards and hills that existed only when we weren't looking directly at them. My radio was picking up dispatch calls from 1987, 2003, and what sounded like sometime next century. Amanda clutched my hand like it was the only solid thing in a universe gone mad. "Mr. Anderson," she gasped as we stumbled through what might have been the parking lot. How long was I gone? It felt like forever, but also like no time at all. I checked my watch. The digital one was still spinning wildly, but my analog backup showed 3:17 a.m. on October 14th. About 16 hours, I told her, though I'd experienced much longer. Your parents are going to be so relieved. The reunion was everything you'd expect. Tears, desperate hugs, Carol Wheeler collapsing with relief while Jim kept saying thank you over and over. But as I filled out my report, trying to figure out how to explain a missing person case solved by supernatural intervention, Amanda pulled me aside. "They're still out there," she whispered. "The people in robes. I could hear them in my dreams, saying they'd find another way. They called themselves the Circle of Eternal Moment, and they've been in these woods for longer than the park has existed." I nodded grimly. "I know. But now I know how to find them too." That was 3 years ago. Since then, I've learned to recognize the signs of temporal distortion, and I've quietly dealt with 6 more supernatural incidents in Olympic National Park. The government doesn't need to know that some missing persons cases require methods they don't teach at the academy. I keep a photo of Amanda with her parents at their reunion in my wallet. Every time I feel reality starting to slip, every time the shadows move wrong or my equipment starts malfunctioning, I look at that picture and remember that love, real, desperate, family love, is stronger than any dark magic these ancient cults can summon. Because in the end, that's what saved Amanda Wheeler. Not my 26 years of experience, not my ranger training, not even my service weapon. It was the thought of her parents' love, so pure and powerful that it could break through time itself. My name is Thomas Anderson, and I'm still a forest ranger at Olympic National Park. But now I know that protecting people sometimes means protecting them from things that exist outside of time, space, and natural law. And I'm ready for whatever comes next.